Hello and welcome to this new video. In this video I'm going to show you how to manage users in an Oracle database. In an Oracle database, the user is basically used to connect to that database. All database objects like tables, indexes, views, etc. can be created under that user. Users and schemas are basically the same thing. So when we say a user or a schema, it means the same thing. Another way you can look at it is that user is the account that you use to connect to a database, and the schema is the set of objects like tables and views that belong to that account. Here, as you can see, I have a demo database. I have started it here on the terminal, and I used the SQL developer utility to connect to this demo database. This demo database has some sample data, and it has also some sample users and schemas like the HR schema, for example. So let's see how to manage some users with this demo database, for example. So let's say I want to create a user called Joe. So the query for that is create user Joe. By the way, I'm connected to this database using the sys user, but you can create a user using any DBA account, or using any account that has the DBA role. Okay, so the syntax is create user Joe, identified by, let's say, for example, Joe at 2022, and then we say the profile of this user is the default profile, and the default tablespace is the user's tablespace, and the temporary tablespace is the temp tablespace. I think here we need to put this password between two double quotes. So let's try to run this and see if it works. And it works. As you can see here, user Joe created. So if I go here under other users, I don't see the user Joe yet. So let's do refresh. And now I can see the user Joe. If I expand this and expand tables, I see nothing here. If I expand views, I see nothing here. Indexes, nothing. However, if I go to HR and tables, I see that the user HR has some privileges on these tables. It has a privilege on a view, and it has some indexes. So you see that we have not granted this user any privileges yet. The minimum privilege required to connect to a database for any user is the create session privilege. So let's try to grant this privilege to this user. So the way to do this is to say grant create session to Joe. If I want to run just this query and not run the one above it, just select it and click on this run button. So as you can see here, it says grant succeeded. Now this user Joe can connect to a database. Let's say I want to change the password of this user. So the way to do this is to say alter user Joe identified by, and then you type the new password. Let's say I want to make the password Joe and then hash 2022 instead of the @ symbol. So now to run this, select it again and click on run, and you see here user Joe altered. If it doesn't work, you will see an error. Okay, so if you see a confirmation message like this, it means that the query has been executed successfully. Now let's see how to lock and unlock a user. So let's say I want to lock this user. I would say alter user Joe account lock. So if I run this query, the user is going to get locked. If I want to unlock it, I would say the same thing, alter user Joe account unlock, and it's going to be unlocked. If you want to change the password of a user and unlock it at the same time, you can do this. You can say alter user Joe identified by the new password and say account unlock. So it would change the password and unlock the account at the same time. If you want to make a user if you want to make a user password expire, it's possible. And what's going to happen is that when the user does log in, it will prompt him to set a new password. So the way to make the password expire is by doing alter user Joe account expire, and the user will be prompted to change his password. You can also change the default table space of a user. So first let's see how we can view the default table space of a user. So the query is select username default table space from DBA users where username equal Joe. So let's run this. I have an error. I think I'm going to need the quotes here. Okay, let's try again. No, I think I have a typo here. Table space from DBA users. Okay, let's try again. Actually, what I want to do here is show the default temporary table space. So let's make this temporary table space and run it again. Still not working. But if I change this to Joe, capital letters, it works. To be honest, I don't know why. As you can see here, Joe's table space, default temporary table space is temp, but when this is in small letters, it doesn't work. I don't know why, but anyway, this is the default temporary table space. If you want to see the default table space, you can just put default table space instead of temporary table space, and you will see that the default table space is users. If you want to see both the default table space and the default temporary table space, you can do that. So if I run this, as you can see, default table space users, temporary table space temp. If you want to change these parameters, you can do alter user Joe default table space, for example, users 2. But of course, the table space users 2 has to exist. You have to create it first. And if you wanted to change the temporary table space, you would also do alter user Joe temporary table space, for example, temp2. But if I try to run this, it's going to generate an error because the temporary table space temp2 does not exist. Same thing for users 2. It will say users 2 does not exist. You have to create it first. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about privileges. A privilege is a permission to execute a particular type of SQL statement or to perform a particular action on a database object. We have two types of privileges. We have system privileges and we have object privileges. A system privilege is the right to perform a particular action. If you want to list all the system privileges in an Oracle database, you can run the following query. So if you do select distinct privilege from this table, dba sys privs. So if you run this, you would get all the system privileges. So these are all the system privileges. For example, create table, create any context, create table space, alter user, alter system. All these are system privileges. Create job, alter session, for example, drop any view, drop any table, create user, the one we just used to create a user, and so on and so forth. So we have 240 distinct system privileges. We have seen already how to grant the create session privilege to the user Joe. So let's try to grant this user other system privileges. For example, we can do grant, let's say for example, grant him create any table and alter any table. So grant create any table, comma, alter any table. Of course, you would separate the privileges by comma to Joe. So if I run this, it would, or it should, grant these two privileges to the user Joe. So let's run this, and it says grant succeeded. If you want to see all the privileges that have been granted to Joe, you can run this query, select privilege, comma, grantee from dba sys privs, where the grantee is Joe. Let's run this. And I think I should make Joe capital letters. And yes, so these are the privileges I have granted to Joe. First, we have granted him the create session. Then we have granted him the create any table. And then we have granted him the alter any table. So that's correct. And of course, since you can grant privileges to users, you can also revoke those privileges. So let's say we do revoke alter any table from Joe. So this should revoke this privilege from the user Joe. So if I run this, it's going to say revoke succeeded, and if I run again this command, I should see only 2 privileges and not 3. So yes, Joe now has create session and create any table. He does not have alter any table. In addition to system privileges, we have object privileges. And what is an object privilege? It's the right to perform a particular action on an object or to access another user's object. So first, let's see how we can list all the object privileges. We can do that with this query, select distinct privilege from DBA tab privs. Let's run this. And as you can see, these are all the object privileges in an Oracle database. So you have references, use, insert, alter, dequeue, write, execute, inherit privileges, delete, update, select, read, inherit remote privileges, and flashback. You have 14 object privileges. If you remember, I told you here that the user HR has some tables. So let's see if I can grant Joe some privileges, some object privileges on these tables. So let's say I do grant select comma update comma delete on HR dot jobs to Joe. So for the moment, the user Joe does not have any tables. So let's run this and see what it's going to do. I think I have a typo here on select. So let's run this again. It says grant succeeded. So we have granted select update delete on hr.jobs to Joe. Okay, so if I refresh here, I see nothing. But the user Joe should have these privileges, these object privileges on this table. Okay, if you want to see all the object privileges that the user Joe has, you can do select grantee owner table name privilege from DBA tab privs, where the grantee is Joe. So if I run this query, you would see that the user Joe has the privileges select, update and delete on the table name jobs that belongs to the HR user or schema. Okay, if I add to this list here, if I add the insert privilege and run this command again, I should see 4 object privileges, which are select, insert, update and delete. Okay, so clearly you can see that this is working as expected. Now let's say that we want to revoke the delete privilege from the user Joe on the HR .jobs table. We can do revoke delete on HR.jobs from Joe. Now let's see if this is going to work. It says revoke succeeded. So if I run this, I should see only 3 object privileges. So no delete, just select, update and insert. Now let's see how to manage roles. A role in an Oracle database is a collection of privileges. It allows easier management of privileges. So if you want to create a role, we can say create role HR role as an example. So HR role created. Now we can grant privileges to this HR role. So after creating the HR role with this statement, create role HR role, we can grant system and object privileges to this HR role. For example, we can say grant create session to HR role. We can say grant create any table to HR role. So these are system privileges. We can say grant insert comma select on HR dot jobs to HR role. So now if I run these 3 commands or these 3 queries, it would say grant succeeded. This means that this HR role now has create session and create any table, which are system privileges, and it also has insert and select on the HR table jobs, which are these insert and select are object privileges. If you want to view all the system privileges granted to a role, you can do this. Select role privilege from role sys privs where role equals HR role. So let's run this and we get 2 system privileges, create session and create any table, which we have granted here. Okay, same thing if you want to view object privileges granted to the HR role, you would do select role owner table name privilege from role tab privs where role equals HR role. So let's run this and we have granted 2 object privileges to the HR role, which are select and insert on the table jobs that belongs to the schema HR. So this is working exactly as expected. And of course, the utility overall is to be able to grant it with all the privileges that it has to a user. So if you want to grant a role to a user, you would just do grant HR role, for example, to Joe, and all the privileges that have been granted to the HR role will be granted to the user Joe. So let's run this, and it would say grant succeeded. So now the user Joe has all the privileges that have been granted to the HR role. If you want to see all the users that have been granted a certain role, you can do this. You can say select grantee, granted role from DBA role privs, where the granted role is the HR role. So let's run this. And of course, we have Joe that has been granted this role. And we have also the sys user, which by default has any role. Finally, I'm going to show you how to drop a user or a role. So if you want to drop a user, you would just do drop user and then the name of the user. You can do cascade in order to delete all the objects that it owns. Same thing, if you want to drop a role, you would just do drop role, HR role, and it would delete the HR role. And with this, we reach the end of this tutorial in which we have covered user management. I hope this video has been helpful for you, and thank you for watching.